In 1933, once prosperous Ukrainian farmers suddenly found themselves being held at gunpoint, forbidden from feeding their families with the grain recently harvested. Starvation was rampant. With the stroke of a pen, Joseph Stalin had created the Holodomor, the worst man-made famine the world had ever seen. Socrates defines a virtuous person in terms of four values: wisdom, courage, moderation, and justice. In stark contrast, Stalin's lifelong viciousness embodied the exact opposite. First, instead of wise, Stalin was foolish. He was instinctively driven to extremes to ensure his own power, regardless of the consequences for his people and country. For example, paranoid that potential rivals riddled his military, Stalin had his secret police purge the Red Army of its senior generals. As a result, during the Winter War with Finland, Russia sustained tremendous casualties, which signaled to Hitler that the Soviets could be easily overwhelmed by his blitzkrieg war strategy. As for courage, Stalin acted ever the insecure coward. He routinely hid in his many residences, composing lists of Trotskyists, rivals, enemies of the state for the secret police to execute. His extreme paranoia extended even to his personal doctors, especially if they had Jewish names. When doctors told him to ease up or risk a stroke, Stalin thought they were threatening his life, so he jailed them. This proved fatal when he later collapsed and died from the very stroke his doctors had warned him of. He lay incapacitated in his office for hours before he finally died because no one had the courage to enter his office, and when they did, no doctors were available. A righteous person's third virtue, according to Socrates, is moderation. Stalin was pathologically excessive most of the time. Even a glimmer of suspicion in his eyes resulted in a swift execution. Whether the person in question was a general, a doctor, or even his own son, he mounted purges against millions of his own people during the 1930s that rivaled Hitler's extermination of Jews. Finally, a virtuous person acts with fairness, justice. Socrates' fourth virtue. Stalin, by contrast, acted just the opposite of these. In a particularly perfect example of his selfish pride, when his very own son was captured by the Germans, Stalin refused an offer to trade him for a German field marshal because he was only a lieutenant. Joseph Stalin's foolishness, cowardice, violence, and selfishness can be seen as an expression of his soul, envisioned by Socrates as a multi-headed beast with three heads: reason, spirit, and desire. In a drawing of Stalin's soul, the desire head would dominate, since Stalin acted mainly out of irrational fear to maintain his godlike power. The lion head of spirit would also be sizable because of Stalin's famous temper. Finally, the human rational head of his soul would be so small as to be virtually unnoticeable. In conclusion, Stalin's nature epitomizes the vicious person in opposition to Socrates' virtues. The tyrant form of governing and a soul dominated by desire. Socrates got it right when it comes to the man of steel.